Hey guys, my name's Erin, and today I wanted to show you one of my favorite methods of mind mapping the abdominal aorta. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So we know the aorta begins in the left ventricle of the heart, pumps the oxygenated blood up through the aortic arch. There's three branches that come off of the arch that supply the upper limbs and the head. And then the aorta is going to continue in its arch to descend into the thoracic cavity, and there it's going to provide the blood supply for the thoracic cavity. As soon as it passes the diaphragm, it then becomes the abdominal aorta, which is what we're going to be discussing today. All right, so there's going to be three main branches of the abdominal aorta. Our most superiorly exiting one is going to be our celiac trunk. Then we're going to have next our superior mesenteric. And our inferior mesenteric. And one last thing about the abdominal aorta before we get started on the celiac trunk. As soon as it hits about the level of L4, it's going to bifurcate into what's known as the common iliac arteries. So we're going to have a right common iliac and a left common iliac. And those are going to supply the pelvic cavity for the most part. So iliac. So let's go ahead and get started with the celiac trunk. One of the first arteries that's going to be coming off of this is going to be our splenic artery, and as the name suggests, that is going to provide blood to the spleen. We're going to have a branch coming off it before it reaches the spleen, however, called the left gastroomental. And the gastroomental arteries are going to supply the stomach, specifically the greater curvature. On the other side of the celiac trunk, we're going to have the left gastric artery coming off. And gastric arteries are going to supply the lesser curvature of the stomach. So we've got gastroomental supplying the greater curvature and gastric supplying the lesser curvature. The last branch that's going to be coming off of the celiac trunk itself is going to be the hepatic artery proper. And we know that because it's got the term proper in it, it's going to bifurcate, and it does, into right and left hepatic arteries. And these are just going to supply the liver. So we've got our right hepatic and our left hepatic. We're going to have two more branches coming off of the hepatic artery proper before it bifurcates, however. We're going to have our right gastric. So we had our left gastric providing blood supply to the left aspect of the lesser curvature of the stomach, and so the right gastric is going to supply blood supply to the right aspect of the lesser curvature of the stomach. We're going to also have a cystic artery, and as the name suggests, it's going to supply the cystic duct as well as the gallbladder. All right, and our last branch coming off of the hepatic artery proper is going to be our gastroduodenal. Ran out of space there. Gastroduodenal. And this is also going to branch. Got a lot of branching going on. So one of the first branches is going to be your right gastroomental, which is going to be supplying the right aspect of the greater curvature of the stomach. Excuse me. So we've got right gastroomental. Then we're going to have two more branches coming off that are going to supply the pancreas and part of the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. So we're going to have a posterior superior pancreaticoduodenal artery. And an anterior superior pancreaticoduodenal artery. And those are both going to be coming off of the gastroduodenal. Alright, so that's it for the celiac trunk. Let's move on to the superior mesenteric. So the superior mesenteric artery is going to supply the majority of the right side of the lower abdominal cavity. So we're going to supply the small intestines. We're going to supply the ileum of the small intestine specifically with the ileal artery. Then we're going to supply the jejunum with the jejunal artery. And we're also going to have the ileocolic artery, which is going to supply the cecum of the large intestine, which is the area where the small intestine and large intestine connects. It's going to be the ileocolic. All right, and we saw over here we had an anterior superior pancreaticoduodenal artery and a posterior. So we're going to have our posterior inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery. And that's going to supply the rest of the pancreas and the duodenum. So pancreaticoduodenal. All right, and then we have two more arteries coming off of here. So we're going to supply the ascending colon with the right colic artery. I'm going to write that down here. Right colic. And we're going to supply the right side of the transverse colon with the middle colic artery. So middle colic. And that wraps it up for the superior mesenteric artery. And then our last big artery coming off of the abdominal aorta is going to be your inferior mesenteric. So we had a right colic. So on this side, we're going to have the left colic, which is going to supply the rest of the transverse colon and the descending colon. We're also going to have the sigmoidal artery, which is going to supply this sigmoid colon. So sigmoidal. And the last, we're going to have the superior rectal artery, which, as the name suggests, is going to supply the superior aspect of the rectum. And that's it for the inferior mesenteric artery. And then we just got 6 more branches coming off of the abdominal aorta itself. So first we're going to mention the gonadal arteries. You're going to have one of those on each side, and those are going to supply the gonads. So in males we're going to have the testicular arteries, and in females you're going to have the ovarian arteries. And those are just going to descend all the way into the pelvic cavity. Next we'll have our lumbar arteries, which are going to supply the lumbar region of the spine. So you're going to get not only the vertebral bodies, but also all of the muscles on the posterior wall of the abdominal cavity. We're also going to have our median sacral artery, which there's just going to be one of, and that's going to go right in between the left and right common iliac arteries and descend in the pelvic cavity as well, and provide blood supply to the sacrum and the coccyx. Then we're going to have an inferior phrenic artery. So coming off of the thoracic aorta, we had a superior phrenic artery, and that's going to supply the superior aspect of the diaphragm. The inferior phrenic is going to supply the inferior aspect of the diaphragm. We're also going to have our adrenal arteries. So we're going to have one on each side, and they're going to supply the adrenal glands, which are going to sit right above each of the kidneys. I don't know why I put an N there. Adrenal. And then last of all, we're going to have our renal arteries, which are going to supply the kidneys themselves. So that's it for the abdominal aorta.